So since we were in the midst of the A's trying to get a new ballpark at the Howard Terminal site at the waterfront in Oakland, I thought it would be really interesting to take a step back and look at all of the concepts for Oakland stadiums over the years for the Oakland A's. And obviously, the A's have looked at other cities such as San Jose and Fremont over the years, but I thought it would be interesting to only look at the Oakland ones and see how these renderings have progressed over time and how these plans, where they are and where, what would have happened, definitely. So that is something very interesting, and I thought, let's take a step back, kind of look at a linear order of these stadiums, and we're going to have to go all the way back to 1960 to look at this first one. So, for those of you that don't know, the A's started in Oakland in 1968. That's when they moved from Kansas City to Oakland. So, 1960 was almost a decade before they moved. But there was a stadium concept in 1960 for a ballpark, and I'm kind of using this one as an honorable mention because it technically wasn't for the A's in particular, but it was going to be a $21 million multi-purpose stadium, which sounds very cheap now, but was very expensive for its time. And it would have seated 48,000 for baseball and 85,000 for football. So it was mainly for a baseball team in the future and the Raiders, because the Raiders started in 1960. So basically the Coliseum site as we know it now was also being considered, and this site was considered at Lake Merritt, or very near Lake Merritt. And Lake Merritt is a pretty big lake in Oakland. It's a pretty big monument for the city. And honestly, the stadium looked pretty good. I mean, I think it's kind of similar to the Oakland Coliseum in some ways. It's like very 1960s, the style of it. But I think, the location is pretty good, obviously right off the freeway, and for its time, definitely something very modern. That's a very interesting stadium design. 85,000 for football, 48 for baseball, 48,000 that is, and very big for today's standards. I mean, stadiums for baseball seems like they're getting smaller and smaller, and I think this is a pretty good stadium for its time. I don't know if it would hold up now, but maybe better than the Coliseum. So that's the first one. So now the next one I'm going to talk about is 42 years later. And this one is probably one of the most famous just because it looked very, very cool and the renderings were kind of futuristic for its time. So in 2002, HOK Sport in the city of Oakland released a study that looked at 7 different sites for a new A's ballpark. And this was in 2002, like I said. By mid-2002, the parties had settled on an uptown location. The 42,000-seat ballpark would have been located at 20th Street between Telegraph and San Pablo, so right in downtown Oakland. And the plan was eventually vetoed by the mayor of Oakland, who was in favor of using the site for household utilities instead. And that's a very recurring thing. The city of Oakland just not wanting stadiums. That's the way it is. And I love this rendering. I really wish the A's could have got this done because a lot of better things could have happened. This is a great rendering. It was right near BART, which is a public transportation train system, which would have been very convenient. There's the Fox Theater. There was a lot of downtown around it. It would have been a very cool stadium, and right in the middle of Oakland, where all the action's going on. I think this is a great rendering. I really wish this happened. It unfortunately will never happen, but it was a very cool idea in theory, and you look at the pictures, it just looked for its time very futuristic. Nowadays it maybe would be different in that aspect, but I really like this idea in 2002, right during the Moneyball stage. And we're going to go ahead 3 years to the 2005 Oakland plans. This stadium reminds me a lot of Minute Maid Park for some reason, or the Globe Life Park when it was a thing. It kind of has that Texas stadium feel to it. But this stadium's really, really cool and also kind of futuristic for its time. So in 2005, there was a 360 architecture and Gensler architecture plan for a 35,000-seat ballpark located just north of where the Oakland Coliseum is, so kind of in East Oakland. The plan was unfortunately abandoned in late 2005 when the land was refused to be sold. So you look at the renderings, I mean, there's a pool, there's like balconies. This almost looks like a hotel type thing. And I think this could have definitely worked. It was very close to where the Coliseum was. And I think also there were plans for a new football stadium around this area too. But that's a different conversation. But unfortunately, this never happened as well because of the rejection to sell. So in around 2011 and in 2012, this is the next one I'm going to head to. There was a plan for Coliseum City, and Coliseum City was an idea of completely changing the Coliseum site for a new football stadium and a new baseball stadium, and I believe a basketball stadium was in the mention of that as well. And I really wish this happened. You know, you have a baseball stadium and a football stadium in walking distance from each other. And the A's and Raiders would have been able to both stay in Oakland and at the Coliseum sites alike. Coliseum City, unfortunately, never happened for, pretty much the same reasons as the others. It just fell through. But I like this plan. The stadiums were a lot more simple, kind of just rebuilding better versions of what the Oakland Coliseum was, and the Raiders and A's alike having their own venues. And I kind of wish this happened because it involved both teams. So yeah. Then the final one I'm going to talk about was a little bit more recently. Just a couple years ago, the A's had ideas for a settlement on the Peralta site. And for those of you that don't know, the Peralta site was near Laney College, and that's where the Oakland Roots play. It's a college in Oakland, and the idea was actually involving the college as well. They were going to get a new ballpark for their college baseball team, and the A's were going to get a new ballpark. But unfortunately, the plan was protested against because teachers were complaining about it. It was very nonsensical. These teachers just getting involved with something that they didn't really have anything to do with. The school administration, I mean, you can't reject something that's out of your power, but of course the city of Oakland sided with them because they don't really care about sports. So that happened, and here we are. So those are the main ones I'm going to talk about. There's obviously more ideas that came up over the years outside of Oakland, San Jose, Fremont. A's were thinking of moving to other cities too, outside of California. But let me know your guys' thoughts, and let me know what stadium that I brought up was your favorite, or what stadium idea. You know, all of these could have been good in theory, maybe aside from the 1961, because that's kind of when the Coliseum came out, so it would have been needed to rebuild. But with Howard Terminal, that's obviously what we're talking about now, and hopefully I don't add Howard Terminal to the list of stadiums that never happened. I think that's going to become a reality, and I'm crossing my fingers. So guys, let me know your guys' thoughts on this. I'll see you guys later, and yeah, go A's.